Are we ready to go?
Okay, if everyone's ready and everyone's here, we can start the meeting or the webinar. There's not any more questions from anyone.
Thank you very much. I will launch the meeting then.
I will start the meeting. Give it like 1 minute maybe for the participants to join, and then we can start.
You tell me.
I will.
Good afternoon. I'm Markus Hanisch, Director here at Humboldt University's Center for Rural Development. A warm welcome to the third panel of the 2024 Development Policy Discussion Days online, here from Humboldt University Berlin and here from the Heinrich-Böll Foundation. As a collaboration between Humboldt University and Heinrich-Böll Foundation, we conduct this series of 3 consecutive events now for the 23rd time. Yesterday afternoon, we already had a hybrid panel, a very interesting event on green industrialization, rethinking African-German cooperation for energy-intensive value chains, together with the European Association of Development Research and Training Institutes as a co-host. This morning, we already had a purely digital format for panel 2, titled Conservation at What Price? Bridging the Gap Between Wildlife Conservation and Human Rights. Very interesting inputs and important critical discussions. And as always, we will summarize and publish inputs and results from all our discussions in the form of briefing papers shortly after the event. This digital format of the Development Policy Discussion Days allows full access from an international community of discussants, and this fits very well to the developments here at Humboldt University, where we have now also fully internationalized the access to our financial scholarship and our study program on international cooperation for sustainable development. Great to see the organizers of this event at work, and now internationally recruited 62nd cohort of this program this year for the first time with young professionals from Asia, Africa, Latin America, Europe, and Germany, studying at Humboldt University. You're all organizing the event together with strong collaborators and very committed scholarship holders of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation. Once again, a cordial thank you to Jörg Haas and Elena Gnand from Heinrich-Böll Foundation for all your support. Now let me wish us contentful and fruitful final event discussions on another burning issue in international cooperation and development. Our next panel is titled In the Shadow of Colonial Culpability. Can Germany meet demands for restorative justice through bilateral development cooperation? In this panel, all discussing with us this afternoon ask about solutions and the pathway towards restorative justice and the role bilateral development cooperation as an instrument can take in this debate. Dear distinguished panelists, I'm very impressed and grateful for your willingness to inform us and discuss with us today. I wish us all critical and constructive debate on this important issue and pass over to our dear colleague from Heinrich-Böll Foundation's Globalization and Transformation Department, Jörg Haas. Jörg, the floor is all yours for the next minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jörg Haas. I'm head of the Globalization and Transformation Department of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation. And I'm also very pleased to welcome you to this third debate of the 2024 Development Policy Discussion Days. Today's topic is German responsibility for colonial crimes, including the genocide of the Herero and Nama in present-day Namibia. It is shameful to acknowledge, but it took a very long time, more than a century, for Germany to seriously face up to its responsibility for these crimes. And we are still at the early stages of this process. As Heinrich-Böll Foundation, we have been intensifying the debate on these issues for several years now through our Africa department. My colleagues are very active on this. You will find many traces of this engagement on our website. Let me just mention a recent example. We organized 2 weeks ago on May 14th and 15th, a civil society dialogue on German colonial history in Tanzania. But going back to Germany and Namibia, the two governments jointly decided to embark upon, and I quote here the draft joint declaration by Namibia and Germany, to embark upon measures to heal the wounds of the past and create a lasting partnership for the future. For that purpose, the governments agreed on a, quote, a separate and unique reconstruction and development support program. So you see, development cooperation is meant here as a means for restorative justice. However, the declaration has so far remained unsigned due to fierce criticism. It is therefore only appropriate that we discuss these questions also now in the format of the annual development policy discussion days. Before I hand over to the moderators, I would also like to thank our partners at SLE, especially the preparatory group of postgraduates, and my colleague Elena Gnant for the intensive preparation of the event. And I would also like to really thank wholeheartedly to all the panelists who participate in this difficult and very important discussion. I wish us all a fruitful and respectful and constructive conversation. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Very pleased to be here with you today. Whether you lean towards the idea of destiny or chance, I think it is quite interesting to consider that our panel is taking place precisely on May 28th. It was precisely on May 28th, 1908, after all, that the commander of the colonial German forces ordered the formal closure of all Ova, Herero, and Nama concentration camps in what was then known as German Southwest Africa. Very interestingly, during a short introductory meeting with Mbakumo Hengari, he has just shared with us, literally a couple of minutes ago, that he shared with us some breaking news that he himself just received today. The Namibian government has just agreed to officially make May 28th the Genocide Memorial Day. So I couldn't be more excited to be having this event precisely today. It is a pleasure for me to welcome you to today's panel, also on behalf of the entire organizational team. As part of our postgraduate program on international cooperation for sustainable development at the SLE, we have been working very diligently to bring this panel to you. Alongside Leanda Heblish, an HBS scholarship holder, and my SLE colleagues Florent Scherra, Teresa Wolf, Friederike von Urf, Hannah Keller, and Fazal Mahmoud Ali, we have prepared not only this panel discussion, but also an introductory video, which we will show to you shortly. In a few weeks, we will also publish a briefing paper incorporating the key ideas and positions our panelists will discuss during the next 2 hours. As you may know, the upcoming panel is titled In the Shadow of Colonial Culpability, Can Germany Meet Demands for Restorative Justice Through Bilateral Development Cooperation? My name is Daniel Belalcázar Serna, and together with my colleague Hannah Keller, we will be moderating this event.
Yeah, welcome also from my side. I'm really glad to direct attention to such an important topic with today's event. I would like to give you a brief overview of what to expect for the next 2 hours. The aim of our event today is to discuss the role of Germany-Namibia development cooperation. And we would like our panelists to debate whether and how German development cooperation can meet the demands of the Ova, Herero and Nama for restorative justice, for the genocide and other atrocities that they suffered under German rule. We will start with a short thematic input in the form of a video. And after that, Daniel and I will introduce our esteemed panelists. After a first statement from each panelist, we will come to the core part of today's event, the panel discussion. And in the end, we reserve 30 minutes for your questions from the audience, which from now on, everybody who participates on Zoom can write in the chat. But before we close this event at 6 o'clock, we would like to hear practical recommendations from each of the panelists on the way forward.
So for this event to run as smoothly as possible, I am happy to share some technical information with you. This panel discussion will be translated simultaneously to German. So if you prefer to follow the discussion in this language, please use the button with the globe at the bottom of the toolbar and switch to the respective language there. If necessary, you can also turn on the automatically generated subtitles in Zoom by clicking the button on the bottom of your screen. Also, from time to time, the organization team will be sharing some information with you on the chat, as they have already been doing. So to see all messages, please make sure you use the chat button with the speech bubble from the same bar as before. Please note that you can only receive messages, but you cannot write any questions in there. And now coming to the Q&A function, if you have any questions for our panelists, please use the Q&A button from the bar, not the chat. For those of you using a German Zoom version, this button is called F und A for Fragen und Antworten. Please remember to explicitly address your questions to the specific panelist you are referring to, as this will help make our job a bit easier. If you want to, you can also feel free to mention your own name and affiliation in your question. The questions will be visible to the whole audience, so if you find the questions of others to be particularly relevant and you want them to be asked, make sure that you upvote them. So please note that these options, however, are only available when using the Zoom desktop app.
Yeah, our SLE colleagues, Fasal and Florence, they prepared a short video to give us an introduction into today's topic.
Colonialism is a shadow that looms large over history, a chapter marked by the exploitation of resources, the subjugation of indigenous people, and the erosion of cultures and identities. These are frequently discussed facts, but what is less often addressed is how profoundly the colonial legacy continues to affect the socio-economic and cultural fabric in former colonized communities. The effects of colonialism that include social inequality, land dispossessions, poverty, political instability, and environmental degradation resonate even until today in many countries that were colonized. The fact that Germany even has a colonial past is not too well known, even to Germans. In a 2019 poll regarding European perspectives of their colonial past, 30% of the Germans answered that they did not know anything about this part of German history. Not far from where we're holding this digital panel today, close to the Brandenburger Tor, the German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck in 1884 invited representatives from other European colonial powers to the Berlin Conference, where they claimed territories in Africa for themselves without any regard to the existing ethnic and cultural structures. Subsequently, the German colonial forces took control over territories in modern-day Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda, Namibia, Cameroon, Togo, and Ghana. People from the affected communities were forced to work on plantations and had to pay taxes to their colonial rulers. Indigenous uprisings, like the Maji Maji Rebellion in Tanzania, were met with merciless violence. Similarly, in 1904, the German colonial forces dealt ruthlessly with the resistance of Herero and Nama people, as well as Damara and San communities in present-day Namibia. The German colonial forces murdered many resistance fighters on the spot. Others were forced into the desert, where many died of thirst or were imprisoned in concentration camps. Up to 100,000 people are estimated to have been killed, which mounts up to 80% of the Herero and 50% of the Nama population at the time. These killings are now considered the first genocide of the 20th century. And these events have left a lasting and profound legacy on the formerly colonized communities and their descendants that continues to affect them negatively in many ways. The scars of this era are still visible today, sparking the debate on what would be the necessary steps on a pathway towards healing and reconciliation. One concept that explores possible steps is the concept of restorative justice. From a legal perspective, restorative justice refers to a variety of different practices that include the acknowledgement and apology for past wrongdoings, the creation of awareness education, reconciliation, and repatriation of stolen artifacts, and finally, reparations. Reparations in terms of financial compensation are considered to be crucial for rectifying the vast socio-economic disparities created by colonialism and for the economic and social empowerment of the affected communities. The implementation, however, presents significant challenges that include the determination of the form, the recipients, the scale of compensation, and potential legal implications that might arise beyond the specific case. The debate on German colonial history has been long overshadowed by the events of the two world wars. However, through years of activism and protests from the descendants of the victims and their advocates, this chapter of German history is gaining more and more attention. In the last 20 years, dealing with this dark chapter of the colonial past is coming to the fore also in German debates. In fact, the current federal government of Germany has enshrined the goal of addressing its colonial history in the coalition agreement. It is evident from its recent talks with Namibia that Germany wants to come to terms with its colonial past through international and bilateral cooperation. In an initial 2021 joint declaration meant to facilitate reconciliation, the German and Namibian governments at the time declared that Germany would provide Namibia with 1.1 billion euro over the next 30 years. However, this amount is mostly intended for international cooperation programs, which sparks new debates and questions on the role of international cooperation regarding restorative justice. In fact, international cooperation itself is often criticized by some for potentially reproducing colonial hierarchies. With this in mind, we want to dive into the questions that look at how a pathway towards restorative justice in Namibia can succeed. What can be transferred to other countries with a German colonial history? And is bilateral development cooperation the right instrument to effectively foster restorative justice? In search of answers to these and other related questions, together with you and our guests, we will dig deeper into this relevant topic on the shadows of Germany's colonial past. Thank you for joining our discussion.
Yeah, after this insightful thematic input, I'm now very excited to introduce our esteemed panelists. Mr. Hingari, he has kindly accepted to spontaneously represent Dr. Esther Munyangwe, the president of the Herero Genocide Foundation and Namibian parliamentarian, who unfortunately had to cancel her participation in today's event. Nonetheless, as chair of the Herero Ovambandero Genocide Foundation, in short, OGF, Mr. Hingari is a most welcomed addition to this panel. In his position, Mr. Hingari dedicates his work to the memory of the murdered Herero people and calls for justice and reparations. He's a spokesperson and represents the interests of the Herero, Ovambandero, and Nama people in conferences and panel talks. He also co-chairs the Okanjote Chiefs Assembly and Genocide Technical Committee, established in 2021 to unite efforts for restorative justice. And additionally, he chairs the previously disadvantaged Namibian Farmers Union, focusing on the orderly redistribution of commercial farming land and the restitution of ancestral lands, which was forcibly confiscated during the genocidal German colonial period. Professionally, Hingari is a seasoned economist and financial analyst with lots of experiences at managerial and executive level. He's actively involved in multiple enterprises as well. Mr. Hingari, it's an honor to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Secondly, we would like to welcome Mr. Philemon Mtoi. Mr. Mtoi is a Tanzanian historian currently based in Germany. He holds a Bachelor of Arts with Education, majoring in History and Swahili language, and a Master of Arts in History, both from the University of Dar es Salaam. Following his work as an assistant lecturer and special assistant to the Vice Chancellor at Sebastian Kolowa Memorial University, he has been a PhD candidate at the University of Bonn since 2022. His PhD research is on the history of Germany-Tanzania relations. In particular, he is focusing on, and I quote, debating colonial destructive administration, the interface between German and indigenous health systems in northeastern Tanzania between 1884 and 1914. Commenting on debates around the repatriation of human remains and looted cultural objects from Germany to Tanzania, Mr. Mtoi was cited by Deutsche Welle in 2023 with the following words: "The time is right to reconnect, to reconcile the people, and to build a common future." We are looking forward to hearing more on that from you, Mr. Mtoi.
Our third panelist is Ruprecht Polenz. Mr. Polenz is a German politician from the Christian Democratic Union, the CDU party, and a former member of the Bundestag, and a former chairperson of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Since 2015, Mr. Polenz has been the special envoy of the German government in the dialogue with Namibia, particularly concerning the bilateral talks on reconciliation. In this capacity, he has led the German delegation in the negotiations prior to the joint declaration that the German and Namibian governments co-concluded in 2021. We are very curious to hear more from you on that, Mr. Polenz. I'm glad to have you here. Welcome. Yeah, before diving deeper into the topic, I would like you, the panelists, to share your point of view towards today's topic. Mr. Hingari, as a chairperson of the Herero Genocide Foundation, what is your understanding of restorative justice? And in your opinion, which steps do you believe need to be taken by the German side to foster this type of justice?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to address this topic.
Mr. Hingari,
yes.
Mr. Hingari, sorry if I may interrupt you. It would be really, really great to see. Okay, perfect. Now your camera is on.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thanks.
No, I just maybe. No, thank you very much for having me on board to discuss this topic of significant interest to us in Namibia, particularly to the Herero, Bambaderu, descendants of the victims of genocide, and our fellow compatriots, the Nama people of Namibia. The concept of restorative justice, to me or to us as we understand it, since we embarked on the process of the quest for restorative justice for the genocide that was committed by Imperial Germany in the period between 1904 and 1908 in the then Deutsche Südwest Africa, is legal in construct, the concept itself. That is why it requires, as a core, one of the three core principles, that the perpetrator must accept personal responsibility for the harm caused. That's number one. Number two, the perpetrator must be willing to witness for themselves come and see the damage they have caused to those who were wronged or harmed by this act, in this case, act in violation of human rights and acts in violation of international humanitarian law. Finally, a third principle of restorative justice speaks to the active involvement of the perpetrator in correcting the situation. In other words, trying to revert these people to a situation where they would have been had it not been for this intervention, which came with the consequences which would have, constituted these transgressions of international human and humanitarian laws. So that at the core is what we are driving as a restorative justice movement in Namibia on behalf of the Herero and Banderu people and the Namas, our compatriots. So that would be my first parting shot as introductory remarks, just to anchor my discussions going forward.
Very clear points, Mr. Ngari. Mr. Pollens, in your capacity as the former negotiation leader on behalf of the German government prior to the 2021 joint declaration, what is your understanding of restorative justice? And which steps do you believe need to be taken by the German side to foster this type of justice?
When I was asked by the Federal Foreign Minister, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, if I would be willing to lead these negotiations, which have started a few months ago on, let's say, a working
Mr.
level.
Pollens, could you switch on your video, your camera? That would be amazing.
I always try, but my screen tells me that I am cut off from you.
Okay, the technicians are listening. I think they will fix it. Sorry to interrupt you. Please go ahead.
No, it's
now it works.
Now it works. Okay. When I was asked by the former Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier if I would like to take this responsibility as a special envoy for these negotiations, I agreed immediately, because for me it is always and always has been a very important point to my political work that we have to take into account history, and especially from a German perspective, also the wrongdoings and the crimes which Germany committed in the first half of the 20th century. And, we had, after the Second World War, a lot to do to reconcile with our neighbors in Europe, with Israel and the Jews, etc., etc. And I think if you look at the results of these engagements, we can say that we have achieved a lot. Israel is now saying Germany is its second best ally after the United States. From the arch enemy, France has turned to a very close friend of Germany, and vice versa. Macron today is in my hometown Münster and receives a peace award from Westphalia. And also with Poland, we could start, and we are on a good way for getting to a better understanding after history-long fierce disputes between Poles and Germans. And you mentioned it in your introductory remarks. We had so much to do after 45 that we, to some extent, we can say forgot that we had also crimes committed in our colonial past. And you mentioned in your video that 30% of the Germans even don't know about that. And this might be due to the fact that Germany lost all its colonies in the Peace Treaty of Versailles, latest in 1919. And therefore, we were not directly involved in the decolonial phase in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So there was an impression in the German society that we have nothing to do with colonial past. And this has changed, fortunately. And of course, if I went first time to Namibia, I saw and realized how close the remembrance to these crimes is in the Namibian public compared with the German situation. And we have to change this. And we have to come to a common culture of remembrance. And therefore, which was not mentioned in your video, we also agreed in the negotiations on a German-Namibian foundation, which shall work on this creation of a common culture of remembrance via youth exchange, school book projects, etc., etc. This is, in my view, a very important point to get towards a path of reconciliation, which takes which includes broad parts of both societies.
Thank you, Mr. Pollens.
Just two short sentences. We want to heal the wounds created in 1904 until 1908, and therefore we want to improve the chances of living of the current living Herero and Nama people. And this brings these projects, which you are calling development projects, but they are organized differently from our foreign aid and development with Namibia, and they have a different purpose. So I would not take your framing of the discussion. Are we trying to solve these problems via foreign aid and development? No, we have a much broader approach. And if it would be only via foreign aid and development, not I would have negotiated, but the person of the Ministry of Foreign Aid and Development.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Pollens, for those concrete steps that should be taken by the German side to foster restorative justice. I would like to hear from Mr. Mtoy also as an expert in Germany-Tanzania history, working on the destructive aspects to indigenous health of the German colonial administration, about your understanding of restorative justice and what you believe the German side should do to foster this type of justice.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be in this board. I have been actually asked and interviewed in German about the topic of Germany and Africa, particularly Tanzania in the case. My understanding, I would just summarize, my understanding of restorative justice actually come from different perspectives, and I have different perspective on how this matter should be taken care of. To me, actually, I'm not a person who believes on immediate reparations or coming down and you said, okay, I give you because I did this to you. Historically, in 1919, after the First World War, and last year I visited the city of Wesel, and the conclusion of victorious of the war, they actually made a harsh condition to Germans that Germany is the causative of the war, and they made reparation to pay a lot of amount of money. And later on, we have actually noticed that that has never been a solution for making the world as a better place to live. We understand later it actually led to the Second World War. My concern is actually there should be a very, what I call restorative justice for example, for genocide or like Nama and Herero or Majimaj. I think it should be involved to address historical injustice through process aimed at healing and reconciliation. And actually this will be done under the following factors or issues. First, I acknowledge the visit of the president of Germany last year, Frank-Walter Steinmeier in Tanzania. And for the first time, he acknowledged the historical injustice that were done by the Germans. The second point that I will actually contribute is that I'm looking forward to see community involvement. Mostly these issues has been discussed by the people from the top. And at the end, you left those people who have been affected direct with nothing, while actually they have to feel that there's involvement in the process of healing and reconciliation. Last, they should also remember that the cultural sensitivity should be a part of all the activities that we have to do. Let me just end here, then I will give my last part in the last session, if you give me an opportunity. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Mr. Mtai, you will get a chance to further elaborate what you also mean by cultural sensitivity, for example, later on. Yeah, we have 3 different views on this topic, and I think they are going to make this discussion very fruitful and interesting.
Well, thanks very much. Now we will address Mr. Hengari for the very first question. Mr. Hengari, when questioned about the exclusion of Ova Herero and Nama communities from the negotiations between the German and Namibian governments that led to the 1.1 billion euro agreement, German government representatives have asserted that the democratically elected Namibian government is a legitimate representative of all Namibian people. Additionally, they emphasized that the Namibian government holds sole responsibility for determining the participants in the negotiations leading to the 2021 joint declaration. In essence, they contend that Germany need not concern itself with who is involved in the negotiations from the Namibian side. What are your thoughts on this, Mr. Hengari?
Thank you again. I think that is where the elephant lies, or the elephant that is in the room, is the position that the German government has adopted vis-a-vis the question that you put for us to discuss today, which is restorative justice. Now, restorative justice, as I said, the construct of the concept is legal. It presupposes that someone has committed or created a harm, which is a crime. In this case, in terms of international humanitarian law as well as human rights law, and that the process of addressing that requires the perpetrator and the victim to face each other and engage in a process where the perpetrator accepts that they have committed a crime and they have caused harm. They must accept that responsibility. And not only stop there, move on to take the necessary steps to correct that harm. The current federal government of Germany is running away from that legal responsibility. Not only is it running away from the legal responsibility, it is avoiding dealing with the people on the question that they ought to address. That is why they have come up with a new classical approach to this question by throwing bilateral development aid down the throat of our small government, defying all protocols that there are pertaining the question of how one deals with a situation when the question of genocide arises. So what we are hearing from the distinguished Mr. Pollins on what Germany has offered, and the question, the way you paraphrased it, Germany has yet, as we are talking, to confront the issue of genocide in Namibia. Germany has created a path around that issue by engaging with the state of Namibia nowhere have you come and nowhere will you come across a situation where the question of genocide would be addressed by a state, because a state could never be targeted for genocide, for extermination. Never. The people who were targeted for extermination are Herero through the proclamation of Ontrota in 1904, the 2nd of October. Not only were they targeted, they were that was perfected and pursued. Now, if you come to atone for that as a German Federal Republic, and you say you are talking to the government as the representative of the people, what actually are we saying? Or are we moving into these other complicated legal constructs, which does not regard us, Black people, as humans? At the time the crimes were committed, in that morality of the national law. And that is why what was negotiated that Mr. Pollens spoke to has not yet touched a little bit of what surface or what has to be dealt with for us to feel that there is a process of restorative justice being pursued here in Namibia. We have differences with the approach of the German government on that, as the OGF, as the chiefs under the Okanjo Assembly. We have differences with our own government on that concept, because we believe if we have to be true to the creed of the United Nations that speaks to, and the international law that speaks to restorative justice, Germany must engage directly with the descendants of the victims of that genocide. Germany must accept that she has committed genocide. In a document that we just referred to called the JD, there is no acknowledgement of that genocide. But then at the end, you hear someone is coming to come and apologize. Then the question that you ask yourself is, apologize for what if there was no genocide? It's in the context of the word.
Thank you very much.
That is, and then you talk of how does bilateral aid become restorative justice or becomes reparation? The whole thing is disjointed, and that is why it has met with condemnation, not only from us, but also all other respected individuals and institutions.
That's a really interesting point, Mr. Hengari. Thanks very much. Mr. Pollens, I would like to ask you if you would like to respond directly to some of the points that Mr. Hengari just made. In particular, if you could answer regarding the comment about Germany throwing development aid down the throat of a small government, and also in particularly regarding Germany, and I quote Mr. Hengari's words, running away from legal responsibility for the genocide committed between 1904 and 1908. Thank you.
Of course, it has been a difficult question, who should negotiate? And we have heard now in the statement, the German government should have negotiated directly with Herero and Nama people. What he did not say is that the Herero and Nama people have not a body which is acknowledged by all Herero and Nama as their representative. And what he also did not mention is that when the colonialism ended with the War of Independence against South Africa in '89, it ended with an independent state. And accepting the end of colonialism means, especially to the former colonists, that they have to respect the independence of this state. And therefore, the government, which is elected in a democratic way, is representing the state. And the president of Namibia told us in some meetings that he has a policy and Namibia has a policy, one people, one nation. And he wants to overcome the tribalism of the ancient past. This is a goal of the Namibian state, which the former colonists, I think, have to accept. And of course, we wanted, and we told to the Namibian government that we wanted to come to a reconciliation, especially with the Herero and Nama people, and that it is therefore important that they are included in the negotiations. The Namibian government responded to this, I think, in a very responsible way. The leader of the Namibian delegation was Dr. Z. Nagirwe, a very well-respected Herero person who was a former ambassador of Namibia in Brussels. In every meeting, we had people from the Herero and Nama communities sitting around the table and negotiating with my delegation. And in the preparation of the talks, as we were told from the Namibian government, in the technical committee as well in the so-called political committee, also Herero and Nama representatives were part of. One point. The second is, we realized, of course, and I think when we listened to your statement, it was also hearable, that there is some kind of mistrust from the Herero and Nama people vis-à-vis their own government. And there is a fear that what we are negotiating with the government will not reach out to the Herero and Nama people. They will not get the benefits out of these negotiations. And therefore, we negotiated a result in the joint declaration which which secures that all the projects from vocational training centers to healthcare, etc., are taking place in those regions where Herero and Nama are living right now. And second, that the local communities have to be incorporated in the planning and all the other steps which are necessary to make these projects happen. So they are part of the process which can start after the joint declaration is signed also by the Namibian government. This is, I think, what we could do. What we could not do, if we would not harm and make maybe another very heavy diplomatic fault, is just to ignore the position of the Namibian government. This was simply not possible, also for the reason that the projects can only be realized with the consent of the Namibian government. So yes, there have been from the beginning Herero and Nama leaders who said about us, without us is against us. And therefore, I'm not surprised that there is now a resistance and heated discussions in Namibia about the result. But we simply had no possibility to overcome the described problem that we had to make the negotiations with the Namibian government. But we did as much as we could, that Herero and Nama are included in the ongoing processes, and they have been included, I must say this, also in the negotiations via the chairperson, Zek Naviro, and via the others who were sitting around the table from Herero and Nama people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pollens. Now, I would like to also pose the next question to you, and this is taking into account what Mr. Hengari told us earlier about the different elements of restorative justice, which one of them should be to try to correct the continuations of the legacies that were put there in the first place from the colonial past. So I will just read a small section of a 2022 World Bank report. The report is published in Equality in Southern Africa, an assessment of the Southern African Customs Union. According to the report, in 2018, the descendants of Europeans who began to settle in Namibia during its time as a German colony made up less than 7% of the population, yet owned about 70% of the country's commercial farmland. In contrast, Black Namibians, among them Herero and Nama people who were forcibly displaced from their lands, they constitute over 90% of the country's population and owned less than 1/5 of the commercial farmland in 2018. Many argue that this stark disparity is a direct continuation of the power imbalances rooted upon the 1884 Berlin Conference. As you are probably well aware, there are GIZ and other international development cooperation projects in Namibia that have aimed to provide a fair access to land for landless households. But extreme land inequality remains a significant issue. As a matter of fact, Namibia is still one of the top 10 countries with the worst land inequality issues in the world. So my question for you, Mr. Pollens, is the following. Do you believe that development cooperation is the right tool for Germany to promote a more just access to land, particularly for the Ova Herero and Nama descendants of the victims of colonial land grabs?
We know from the negotiations that land reform is a burning issue in Namibia, and it is very intensively discussed how to do it. We have to take into account that the state of Namibia in 1989, after its independence, issued a new constitution, which is guaranteeing also private property. And this means that land reform is only possible by a way of a willing seller, willing buyer. And in this way, the Namibian state is working on land reform, and Germany is yet supporting this via providing money. And we have also in the joint declaration a paragraph which deals with land reform and means we will support this redistribution of land via money with which the Namibian government can buy farms. If they are sold, they can jump in and say the state of Namibia will buy them and will redistribute to Black Namibian people, Herero and Nama, whoever. It's not up to us to decide. And what we also can do to support this process is to educate people to be a successful farmer later on, because today it is a bit complicated to run a farm successfully, and it needs education. And this can be done in the, for instance, in the vocational training centers, which we are planning to build if the joint declaration is signed by the Namibian government. So this is the way and how we can support land reform in Namibia, and this is what Germany is willing to do.
Mr. Hengari, would you like to add anything to the current discussion?
Yes, can I hop back to the first initial comments before I come to the last part that Mr. Pollens dealt with?
Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, first, one thing that one must make clear is Namibia is a democratic state. It has a constitution that guarantees you the right to settle or live wherever you want. So to say that Germany is channeling money into regions of Herero and Namas, it's a misnomer, it's a fallacy. There's nothing like that. There is no territory in Namibia that is exclusive to Nama or exclusive to Hereros. So if what the Germans are saying they are trying to do is through this bilateral deal, which in its objects falls very short and far of restorative justice, and they think by doing that, it would impact or restore or restitute the Herero, Bandero, and Namas who have lost one of the aspects that they have lost is land that we just spoke now. How does the Nama who has lost land through that construction, where government applies the resources, as Mr. Pollens just said, no project would go without the blessing of the Namibian government, unless I understood him wrongly.
No.
And they have a formula. There is a resettlement, the land resettlement program, for example, that is now on. They have set targets of people to be resettled. There is no criteria that highlights those who have lost land through colonial land grab. There's none. How does that trickle? How does that restitute or restore the Herero and Nama who has lost land through that program? It is not that we do not trust our government. We have all the rights to believe and trust in our government because we can demand ours. But what is owned to Hereros and Namas for the crime that Germany committed cannot be put on the back of government. There is nothing that prevents, if Germany had engaged directly with the victims, I don't think international law would be on the side of us and the Germans to engage on the question of genocide. I don't think it would be a transgression of bilateral relationships if Germany accepted the legal responsibility and the legal route to deal with the question of genocide.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hengari. So now it seems like we are coming to the intersection of colonialism and international development cooperation. So, Mr. Mtoy, the next question is for you. Development cooperation agencies from Germany and other countries from the global north have often faced scrutiny for their perceived role in perpetuating colonial legacies. So, Mr. Mtoy, from your perspective, what factors should be taken into account as global north international cooperation institutions navigate their involvement in addressing the colonial damages of their home countries?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I have to acknowledge that, can you hear me?
Hear you perfectly.
Yeah, I have to acknowledge that the international cooperation, and I'm sorry because the history of Namibia is quite different when you compare to my history, because when you talk about Nama and the Herero in Tanzania, we don't talk about tribals, because the founding father of our nation has been actually building one state. We talk one language, we fight together. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to chip in the problem of Nama in Namibia very well, but I will just take my point, a case study to my country. International corporations, I have to acknowledge that have done a great role in terms of working together in the colonial state. As I'm taking an example as GIZ in Tanzania, they have been working since 1960s, 70s, but I have to be open and honest that this international organization or bilateral organization, they are working under their specific objectives, which mostly we don't understand them. So particularly as an historians, I can say that most of the international bilateral organization, they are working to expand their political recognition in the international arena. So to me, actually, to invest in the case of colonial legacy, I see in some extent that most of the international organizations, they are trying to perpetuate the colonial legacy. They are trying to, in a different way, because as a historian, we believe that colonial activities or colonial can be manifested in different ways, can be manifested in economic, in political, in social, in cultural. So most of these international organizations, they are putting their colonial legacy, they are putting their their colonial legacy in the way that they are still using our resources. They're using our human capital. They're using our cultural to undermine our cultural traits so as to make their cultural or other development agendas to be seen more. So I think if we have to be honest and to find the best way, I don't want to make a comparison on how I wanted to ask this question to the representative from the German government. How do they actually negotiate with the Israel government? Do they treat us the same way as they treat Israel? That's my question. And how do they negotiate with Poland? Why the problem comes when we come to the point discussing with Africans? That's why I actually pointed out, if we need to have a reconciliation, we need to have healing. Acknowledgement of historical injustice should be very honest and should be accountable to the person who have been affected with this problem. If we take it as we invested all our activities to the bilateral and international organization, if you come to Tanzania, they will tell you, we have been working with the GIZ from 30 years ago. So now what are you want to bring? Because they are doing community development in the villages, and they have actually supported to improve some of the, but this international organization, bilateral organization, they have their objectives, and their objectives are quite different to those who we can actually witness in their field.
Mr. Pollens, would you like to reply anything spontaneously to the comments of Mr. Ntoy, particularly in the comparison that he makes about the way that Germany has negotiated with the victims of one genocide versus the victims of another genocide?
First, to all the questions related to foreign aid and development, I must say that I'm not an expert on that. I have been in the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I dealt with human rights and foreign security policy, defense policies. So I cannot jump in to discuss how foreign aid and development policies work, what are the shortcomings, etc., etc. With regard to how to deal with crimes of the past, I think we have to look at each case and try to solve each case for itself, because they are different. The Holocaust with the Jews is something different from the way we dealt with those countries which were occupied by Nazi Germany after 1939 until 1945. And our relationship to France has other problems in the past until 1945. Then maybe our relationship to Norway, which was also not free from severe tensions. And of course, also time plays a role. What in the way what you can do and what you cannot do. For instance, after the Second World War, Germany paid recompensation for those people who suffered personally from forced labor or were personally put into concentration camps. Not to their parents, not to their children, only who suffered personally got something as a compensation. And this, for instance, was impossible when we are looking what can we do with the crimes from 1904 and 1908, because nobody who has suffered in these times is still alive. We are dealing with the grand and grandchildren's generation. So we have to look for another approach. And the approach is, what can we do to improve their chances of living today? And this leads to what we have then in the joint declaration, which the Namibian side agreed upon. I must repeat this. We have an agreement. The negotiations between the delegations are finished, and we are now looking for what the discussions in Namibia will be all about. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of time. If, as planned, the joint declaration would have been signed in 21, maybe the first vocational training center could work right now. Unfortunately, it's not working.
Yeah, Mr. Pullens, you're coming back to the issue that the declaration is still not signed, and therefore actions, yeah, in your opinion, cannot yet take place. But is participation not part of any good governance? You mentioned, okay, you have had over Herero, being part of the negotiations, but I believe there could be different solutions than maybe the one that has been tried and did not succeed. So, Mr. Hengari, do you have any propositions on that? How maybe the negotiations could continue between the German government, the Namibian government, and the ancestors of the victims of the genocide? Do you have any practical recommendations or propositions on that?
Yes, I think. Yes, I think what must be underlined and be made clear is what is the current situation. The current situation is it has been a negotiation between the two governments or between the two states. That is at the core what has been taking place. Now the question is, can one address a crime against humanity, a genocide, through that platform when you have descendants of the victims who continue to suffer the consequences of that genocide today? As we are speaking, some of our compatriots, uncles, nieces, cousins, are in Botswana. Some are in South Africa. They don't speak Herero. They don't speak Nama. How does that person who is there get repaired or restituted or compensated through what the two governments have done? It excludes my brother and sister who is in Botswana. So what is it that could have happened? And we have advised and warned our government from the very first day we learned that Germany has appointed a certain Mr. Pullens, and that Namibia is implored to appoint someone of his caliber. Namibia, not the descendants of the victims. So the construction of what took place never considered the involvement of the descendants. What we have in Namibia was a motion passed in Parliament which implored our government to facilitate, as it were, a dialogue between us, the communities, and the German government, with our government as an interested party. The same way Germany, under different circumstances, granted, engaged with the Jewish state and 23 different Jewish groups. So the question of us not having one united group should not alleviate from the fact that the discussion ought to have included us directly and not a discussion between the two states where decisions and formulations of strategies are done at a cabinet level. How does an ordinary Herero or Nama chief go to cabinet to take decisions with government on what ought to or not ought to happen? And that is why, from our vantage point, what has happened is a betrayal of the blood of our ancestors. It's a betrayal of the sacred cause that we as descendants of the victims have ignited amongst ourselves and then elevated it to the National Assembly in Namibia and all the way to government, where government would now appear to have usurped the role of the victims, the descendants of the victims, in their multitude, from those that are in Namibia to those that are in the diaspora, who should be engaging directly with the German successor state as the perpetrators of these crimes, and these people looking at each other in the eyes. So what is it that could happen where we are now? We think it is not too late in a day yet, because nothing has been done. And the reason nothing has been done is because there are obvious reasons, obvious shortcomings in the current document. It does not deal with the issues. We can go back to the drawing board. And I think that is what has to be considered. That is our position. Go back to the drawing board. We could start with a big international national conference in Namibia of the victims with the assistance or involvement or whatever of our government. Germany must be, as I said, in the restorative justice core principles, must witness, must be here to listen and see what harm it has caused. So that after that, when we move to the process of making amends, she becomes a full participant in that exercise. So what is it that I'm saying? Let's have a big conference. Let's sit around a table, the victims. Let the victim come up with what they think is what has to happen. And then let's get Germany involved and the Republic of Namibia. Let's build a package. We are not looking to create other Bandustans in Namibia. We are looking to bring what this segment of the Namibian population has lost, bring them back to where they could have been or closer to that. Anything that gets constructed as an institution, as I said, in Namibia, we live everywhere where we want. It would not exclude the others, but the people who have to be healed is us. It's not the whole of Namibia. Thank you.
Yeah, very big points, Mr. Hingari. Mr. Mtoy, how do you anticipate that the Namibia case will affect future relations between Tanzania and Germany, especially in the light of Germany's colonial history in Tanzania, including instances such as German forces crushing the Maji-Maji rebellion, which led to the killing of between 75,000 and 300,000 people?
First of all, allow me to correct you from the term Maji-Maji rebellion. It's not Maji-Maji rebellion, it is a Maji-Maji war, because we were actually defending our rights and freedom that has been taken by authorities. Rebellion is the term that it is not actually proper to the nationalists, but also to the people who actually, they have right to be in their land. Actually, I have a very, I don't know, but I'm thinking about, do we think about having the world that is aiming to have a cooperation for more than 100 years to come, or we just have the discussion that will destroy the future, the future of our countries? To me, I don't want to have a relationship that has been like the one that has been caused during the Franco-Prussian War in 1871. You have a long waiting to have a good relationship, while we can learn from our past. That's how the history teaches. We can learn and we can come together. And for the case of Namibia, I think sometimes we have to be critical. If we come to the reconciliation part, the German here, they don't have anything to, they're not appointing any person to be in the table. It is within the country themselves to reorganize, to involve their communities. If you want the German to actually to call for the conference and just, to me, I think I have a very different perspective. We as offenders who have been affected by the colonial legacy, we need to reorganize ourselves. When we go to the reconciliation table, we are sure know what we want to acquire or to achieve. But I think here the problem is we have a problem within our community. For example, I take my case in Tanzania. The motion for reconciliation and healing of Maji Maji war, it started with academicians. I know academicians started to raise this motion, but later on, now you find even the people from the grassroots, they are talking about this. People have been informed about this. So people, they will be in the position, if they are asked to contribute the ideas, how do you want to confront German in the reconciliation? So I think perspective, or it should be viewed that no matter what happens, no matter what the document will actually come to the conclusion, we must be in the position to restore or to maintain our relationship for the betterment of the generation. Because most of the Germans, if you ask the young Germans, they have never, they just hear about this. Even my age, I can feel that from the past, but they are not the one that has been participated in this issue. We need to have a talk that will keep the respect of both sides. Those people who have been affected by the colonial activities, but also those people who have been affected, this has been to be given opposition or chance to explain what to be done. I think if we actually come to the point that we need this side should be, we'll come to the point we'll never sign any document. We'll never sign any document. And I think there's a point of, people, they will start to think that maybe it is not right to trust these people on the other side. That's why people, they are thinking to take their money to the bilateral organizations and the international organization to channel their money to act as reparations. But if we are very serious, honest, and we want to build the future together, because we actually depend each other. We have something that we can contribute to German, and German, they have also something to contribute to us. So we don't have to punish anybody, but we have to come to the point that we come to the point every side should be involved. And that's why I was mentioning about community involvement in my first presentation, that it is a duty of the Namibia and Tanzania government to involve their people about what happens and to collect their ideas and to go to the table. You cannot have all the people in the reconciliation table. You have few people who represent, but that representation should also be inclusive.
Yeah, thank you for emphasizing this point, Mr. Mtai.
Okay, so I am sure that the discussions that we just had must have stirred some thoughts in our audience. So dear audience, now you have the opportunity to ask your questions to the panelists. To do so, as has already been informed in the chat, you may use the Q&A button. Please be sure to indicate to whom of the panelists the question is directed, because we don't have the time for all three to answer them. So if you want to, you may also tell us what your name and affiliations. That would be really good for us to know. Keep in mind as well that you may upvote the questions you find particularly interesting. And from now onwards, my colleagues Fazal and Florence will guide you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Hannah. Once again, hello and warm greetings from my side to our dear panelists and our viewers and audience. I'm very happy to listen to this very insightful and interesting discussion. As you can see, we find ourselves in the Q&A session. And for that, we have already received some very interesting and important questions, which will be very valuable to our discussion. And of course, I'm excited to pose these questions, forward them to our panelists. But before I start with the first question, I would like to request our panelists to kindly keep your answer short so we can address more questions. And with that, I would like to direct the first question to Mr. Hingari. In the discussion, we talked a lot about the participation of the representatives of the affected communities. And one of our viewers asks, were participatory meetings held in the communities, especially in Herero and Nama, to get their needs with regard to what and how this restitution and reparation should improve on their dignity and livelihood? Mr. Hingari.
Yes, thank you for the question. We had discussions with the late president, as I said, when he announced to us that government is forming, is appointing an envoy to be a counterpart to Mr. Polens. And at that meeting, we expressed our dissatisfaction with the fact that we were not going to be negotiating or sitting or advancing our views ourselves. Even if it were around the table where government is a participant, we are not averse to our own government. What we wanted to make sure is that we as descendants of the victims as a whole, including our brothers and sisters in the diaspora, are able to convey our grievances to the Germans, and that the Germans look us in the eyes and accept their legal responsibility for what transpired. So consultations amongst us have been taking place. Agreement between us and the government is what has not happened. Thank you.
All right. I would like to pass on the next question to Mr. Imtoy. While the critique of Mr. Hingari and Mr. Polens were highly appreciated, one of our participants wonders how one should decide who should be included in the negotiations and who not, and where to draw a line. As you mentioned, there are so many people who are nowadays affected by the colonial past, not only in Namibia, but on the entire African continent and worldwide. But who is legitimized to decide for the present and future of the people in Namibia, to say with this particular case? Mr. Imtoy.
I think people, they have to be reminded that in Africa, even before the colonial period, we had our local traditional leaders. And as I'm telling today, they are existing in the region, or for example, in the case of Tanzania, we can take that as a starting point that we involve these traditional leaders who are actually there in their regions to represent their local peoples, to conduct a meeting, and then they can actually be involved direct to the team that need to be sent or to be appointed by the government. But we have our system, which is actually very, if we follow the system, everything can be, my problem is not just to let the government to appoint, but also to allow these traditional leaders to have their representative, because they are the one who live dialect to the people and listen to them, and they talk every day with them. So that was my idea, that it should involve the community from the grassroots to up to the government position.
Thank you.
I don't know if I, especially,
very insightful. I would like to direct the next question to Mr. Polens. And Mr. Polens, this question has received some attention in the Q&A box. We are currently experiencing challenging times in Germany regarding the general shift in the political landscape. I think it's well known. And how far do first the shift towards right-wing politics, and then decreasing governmental expenditures for development cooperation, affect the reconciliation process between Germany and Namibia, and maybe in other cases too? Mr. Pollens.
Yeah. In the last years, during the negotiations and also even sometimes afterwards, I had always a close contact to my former colleagues in the German parliament. And I was invited to brief delegations and committees on the current situation. And my impression is that the German parliament is still ready to, let's say, co-sign this joint declaration and support the German government if it signs it together with the Namibian one. But you are right, we have now one party in the parliament, the so-called AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, which probably might oppose the whole agreement. But it is not the majority of the parliament, and therefore I think from the German side, there is still the willingness and will remain so that the result of the negotiations as defined in the joint declaration will be approved if the Namibian government gives the sign to do so. Also, regardless that some financial restrictions in the general budget might also have an impact on foreign aid and development. With regard to this issue, I can say that in the negotiations with Namibia, we said that first, these foreign aid and development programs we have since '89 will continue, even if Namibia is now not, it has a good development, which usually would lead to less foreign aid and development finance. And what we negotiated with regard to in quotation, healing the wounds, the projects which should take place in the areas where Herero and Nama communities are settling in Namibia. This is separated also in how it is organized later on, separated from foreign aid and development. And therefore, some, let's say, some shortenings in the foreign aid and development in general in the German budget will not have an impact to what we have agreed upon in the joint declaration. But of course, it is for the foreseeable future. We don't know what will be in 5 years or so. The view towards Russia, towards the United States, look wherever you want, are not so encouraging that we should say we have, time does not play a role. Yes, time plays a role, and the sooner we get to this agreement, the better it is, in my view.
All right. I would like to hand over the next question to Mr. Hingari once again, and it comes from Isaac, our colleague here in the SLE. Since you are the representative of one of the affected communities and you have been very active, so he asks, how have the descendants of the Herero and Nama peoples navigated the legacy of colonial violence in post-independence Namibia, or post-independence Namibia? Mr. Hingari.
We have come to independent Namibia as descendants of the victims. But when we were a significant part of the liberation struggle as well. The pioneer of Namibian nationalism was our erstwhile chief, Hosea Kutako, the first traditional leader who petitioned the United Nations for the liberation of Namibia. So our history of resistance comes from the resistance to German colonialism, resistance to the incorporation of Namibia into South Africa, as was proposed in the 1940s by the Nationalist Party of South Africa, apartheid, our people have an attachment to our land and our culture. And we became part of that. Some of us dedicated our young lives to that and are recognized in terms of our statute here as veterans of our struggle. So we have navigated that, became part and parcel of fighting to remove the yoke of colonialism. Now that colonialism is gone, we have turned our eyes squarely on the question within the Republic of Namibia, a democratic state that is, how we address the legacy of that genocide and how we start to reconstruct semblances of the traditional institutions that we had in Namibia, how we reconstruct our social fabric and order, and how we reclaim through democratically provided means, as Mr. Polen said, while respecting property rights, how we can acquire that land. And one way we can acquire that land is if we can get our restitution or compensation from Germany. Then we can go and buy some of the land. So yes, we continue to navigate this in a democratic state where we have become a smaller group or a minority, and in democratic states, particularly in the African context, and maybe not in Africa, because even in Europe and the Americas, you see people vote according to groups, whether it is religious or class economic or what. So we have our clusters of groupings here, and the victims, descendants of those victims, continue to toil in that midst amongst the other descendants and citizens of the Republic of Namibia.
All right, Mr. Mtoy, it can be a difficult question, but I will ask it anyway. One of our weavers, Elizabeth, is asking, what would be a possible legal basis or framework on which the reparation claims can be based on? And how likely is it that Germany can be held responsible by international laws if it is now willing to pay such reparation or acknowledge the genocide as genocide?
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, but I have a very short answer to this question. Actually, the international law, they don't have an apparatus to execute the law that, or the decision that they make. We have seen this in different problems. They can actually have the decision that they condemned or they give favor to one part, but it is very difficult for them to make this law to be realized. So that's why from the very beginning, it's between the two countries to have their own framework. The context should be actually regarded in order to solve this problem. If you take this matter to the international organization, it will reach the point you will never get whatever you think you can get. Because the international organization, they don't have a police to enforce. They just give the decisions, but who is responsible can actually navigate from what you were actually about to reach the point. To me, I think we need to reorganize ourselves, but also from before we come to the point of signing any document, the acknowledgement should be in a way that it actually conveys both parties that we are in the position of being honest and treating both sides equally. If you go to the position and you think you are bigger than the other one, so you can make a decision, you will never also get a good decision. To me, the framework is between the two countries which are actually aiming to come up with the framework on their own. That's what I can say as an historian, but as a legal, someone who is actually an expert of legal, he can give whatever he can give, but I'm sorry to say this, but the international organization has been the source for many conflict in the world, so to say, historically, but also recently, they have been the source of many problems in the different countries. I believe in a local, if they have started, if one side is willing to initiate discussions on healing and reconciliation, we need to be also take this part as an opportunity to talk and to reach the conclusion. That's what I can contribute.
Very interesting. Let's hope that next time we have this discussion, we'll have a legal expert as well,
Sure.
who can weigh in on this issue. Mr. Pollens, I would like to forward the next question to you, and it also received attention from the audience. And the question is, how will the dynamics of land ownership by the German Namibians be tackled in the upcoming reparation agreement? You've already talked about it, that your delegation was supporting the land ceiling. Can you tell us about future plans on this, or like future prospects on this?
Not so much, because how land reform is pursued is a question which the Namibian government is discussing with different organizations in Namibia. And it is nothing which can be, let's say, influenced from the outside, except of spending money for the Namibian government that they can buy farmland to redistribute it. And despite the fact that we can train future farmers, that they can make some money out of the farmland, which if they get some of it. This is the only way you can help to endorse a land reform in Namibia from the outside. It is a question to the Namibian government and to the inner Namibian political discussions, how it will be pursued in the future.
All right. Mr. Hingari, would you like to comment on this, or shall I go to the next question?
I think land is the one resource that in Namibia, you have some of the people that are wealthy in Namibia are predominantly those that have had land rights over transgenerational ownership of land which was acquired forcefully. And land is the basis of any wealth creation. So to us who have lost land through expropriation by decree issued in 1905 by the German colonial administration, that declared and decreed that all land hitherto belonging to the Herero has been ceded or fitted to the state. It then became a capital offense for Herero to own even livestock, including a dog. These things were not thrown in the sea. They were taken by the new settlers. So the wealth that the settlers and their descendants are sitting on today is what we are looking to be compensated back to us. And that is why what was put forward through the joint declaration is an insult to that memory. It doesn't go any inch to healing the wounds. It in fact puts salt into sore wounds. That must be addressed.
Very interesting. actually, it's a good bridge to our next question. And Mr. Hingari, I would like to ask this question to you, from you. One of our viewers writes, Namibia has one of the highest Gini coefficients in the world. That means making it one of the most unequal countries in the world. To what extent is that taken into account in the negotiations for restorative justice? And you just mentioned the issue of land grabbing and equality. What are other areas the colonial past had its influence as well? Mr. Hingari.
The Gini coefficients factor, that you talked about, is a significance. If you say, I think you or your fellow moderator gave a statistics that said the settlers, the descendants, are 7% of the population, yet they own 70% of the land. Now, land is what constitutes wealth, and wealth is what you use to generate income, and vice versa. So the income disparity that you see is, to a large extent, a reflection of that property ownership structure that we have. The other sectors, obviously, are mining. We have had copper being mined in Namibia since the 1800s. We have had diamonds being mined in Namibia since the early 1900s up to now, the ownership of which was foreign, merchant and colonially imported merchants. So what we have is a structure of the economy that does just not cater to the needs of the significant part of the population. The avenues through which one can mitigate this are quite limited. At the moment, our economy, as part of the global economics cycle, has not been performing at the level that it should have. Agriculture, which is the backbone of, at least to help eradicate and get people out of poverty, has been hit by persistent droughts due to climate change and the likes maybe. So yes, the picture looks quite not so much encouraging. We are hearing of good, big, nice projects, green hydrogen and discovery of oil. Those are projects that are probably 10, 15, 20 years down the line. In the short term, I don't know what would happen. So for us as descendants of the genocide, or victims of the genocide, we were looking for some tangible things that would at least put us in a position where we can start to move. Had we been accommodated through the process that is just trying to be falsely concluded, which we hope would not get to that, because it would not end here. We would continue to prosecute this matter.
Okay, my colleagues are signaling to me that we have around 3 to 4 minutes. I will pose the next question to Mr. Imtoy. Mr. Nicol would like to know whether Mr. Imtoy and Mr. Hingari share this view that inequality regarding free traveling, studying and working in other countries due to visas is still a form of, so to say, new colonialism. Mr. Imtoy.
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Yes, yes. So he's basically asking
whether
inequality regarding free traveling and studying and working in other countries due to visa restriction is a new colonialism.
Yeah, it is very unfair to jump to that conclusion. It depends, because when you are talking about visa restrictions, each country has its own rules and regulation on how to regulate the issue of visa. And the matter, inequality is the colonial kind of colonial. It should be decolonized in the minds of people. There are issues has to be dealt using historical perspective, but also there are issues that have to be dealt using current situation in Africa. So there are problems actually can be directly associated with historical perspective, but to me, the issue also has to be dealt because we have also, for example, I remember, I'm not sure, I have to be correct, but Togo or Namibia, they used to have this direct visa to German, or even Cameroon, they have more than 5 years. But that depends on how they have set themselves. If you look to, you jump to the conclusion that this is an inequality, is a colonial inequality, to me has to be justified well. It's not just, just to talk and just without any evidence. There are a lot of mechanisms that has been used to show inequality or to show colonial legacy, but I cannot actually conclude in this that having a visa or having no visa restriction, that is not inequality. You can have no visa restrictions, but still you can have colonial legacy and the inequality in your country. So I can say it is the matter of being how you critically analyze this, the matter of visa issues.
Yeah, fair enough. As a last question, Mr. Polans, one of our audience, he posted a long question, but I will make it short. Can Germany even negotiate with non-governmental actors?
Depends on what the topic is, of course. We are negotiating, for instance, in the international climate conferences with many non-governmental actors. But if we have to negotiate about topics we discussed in these 2 hours, I think it is not possible to exclude governments, and especially if it comes to the relationship between former colonial powers and now independent former colonies. I think it is very sensitive that the former colonial powers respect totally and without any kind of question mark the independence of these new states. And this means they are sovereign to settle their delegations, etc., etc. And this, I think, is a topic which can only be overcome as a problem if in these countries there are mechanisms to be inclusive for all those who have to be represented. And in my view, the Namibian government did a lot to do this, beginning with Dr. Zedna Viwe, a really very well respected Herero person who was my counterpart, and all the other things I mentioned. And one last remark. In all my visits to Namibia, I tried to speak to those who were not on the table. I spoke with the Frederick family, I spoke with the Witboy family, I spoke with Mr. Ruko, I spoke with both genocide committees, etc., to explain what we have been doing and what the purpose is. And therefore, I think it would be the right way to now try to make the best out of the result we have received so far, instead of putting everything on stop and thinking about a new start and a new 10 years or 20 years approach to come to a solution. Therefore, and one last remark, as far as I can see, Germany is the first and only country who tries to deal with this past in the way we are doing it. We are by far not the only colonial power, as we all know. And also, therefore, I think it would be also for the others, a very good signal if the joint declaration will become into work.
Thank you, Mr. Pollens. Unfortunately, we cannot discuss further questions as the time limit does not allow us. As we come to the end of the Q&A session, I would like to take this opportunity and say big thank you to our audience and listeners, especially those who have posted their questions. And of course, a big thank you to our panelists for answering these questions. And a last thank you to my colleagues, Florence and Friedi, who have helped me pose these questions. And with that, I will hand over the floor to Hannah and Daniel.
Yeah, several recommendations on what should be done in Germany and Namibia have been mentioned by you in our discussion already. For example, the acknowledgement of the genocide and other atrocities, or the active involvement of the descendants of the victims of the genocide in the negotiations of the restorative process. I would like all of you to summarize your recommendations on what else should be done socially and politically in order to pave the way for restorative justice.
Can I start?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, what I think will be the most important is political will. That's my recommendation. There must be a will of both government need to have a commitment to address the historical injustice. And this can be done through to government to fund. For example, to me, I advise even my government, we don't need money in hands, but if we can develop the human capital in Tanzania in the area people have been affected, for example, building the college or a university, and you call Maji University, that will make a soundable it's like a drawing restorative justice scheme like that. But also the second is resource. There should be both financial and human are necessary to implement the restorative justice program effectively. So these resources can actually come from both sides in one way. So it depends. Non-governmental organization should also involved to maintain of the justice as well as from academic institutions like universities. They can actually produce very good resources or to inform people on how to maintain our future relationship. The last, it was to have a frameworks for justice. This question I was asked, but I have to explain a little bit that establishing mechanisms such as truth and reconciliation commissions, reparation programs, and community dialogue to facilitate restorative justice, but also to have an instrument to call out arbitration functions is extremely important to make sure that both sides are satisfied with the way the restorative process is done. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present my thought and experience about the historical injustice that has been done in my country and Africa in general.
You're most welcome. You mentioned very concrete practical points, Mr. Mtai. Mr. Pollens, would you like to continue?
Yeah, I think very important is that we can establish a common culture of remembrance in both countries. This means especially to be more aware of what has been done in Germany. There is a lot to do, and we have made also proposals how to improve this. We remember also our colonial past in Germany. Second, we need processes of reconciliation in both societies, which means bringing young people together, etc., etc. And of course, all on the basis of accepting and naming the crimes which have been committed, and therefore in the joint declaration we name that it has been a genocide, and we want to beg for excuse for these crimes which are very precisely described in a common language between our Namibian counterparts and us in the joint declaration. And finally, we have to look together for what we can do in the future for the benefit of both our countries. And also in this regard, there are many proposals on the table, what we can do together. And I think this is finally the task of all what we have been doing, that as soon as we know how to deal with our dark spots in the past, to put it this way, the better we can look for what we can do together for the future, because the challenges are really high and the opportunities are also very great. And therefore we should pave the way via having the right way to deal with the past, to pave the way to get together to a better future.
Thank you, Mr. Pohlens. And Mr. Hungary, which concrete steps in your eyes must be taken in Germany and in Namibia, both on the social but also political level, to pave the way for restorative justice?
I think one of the practical steps to be taken is to distinguish between bilateral relations between Namibia and Germany, of which there are ample and good reasons to exist, and for that to be protected and for it to thrive. That distinction must be drawn between that and Germany's legal responsibility to a section of the Namibian population, against whom Imperial Germany committed genocide. And Germany must, as part of the broader bilateral relationship improvement, look to sit down with the descendants of the victims and craft out a package of reconciliation with them after accepting what it has done at the state level. Because at the end of the day, the people to accept that atonement cannot be the Republic of Namibia. It will be the Herero and Namas. And if that is not brought to them, and one element of restorative justice or reparation is satisfaction. What satisfaction would we as descendants draw from a situation that has completely minimized the demand for us to be recognized in this process? Remembrance. What remembrance is Germany proposing to do for us who have suffered when we go to Berlin or Hamburg, that we can see and say the Germans have, in their collective memory, also started to memorialize what they have done here. And just like you don't want to compare situations, but there are certain things that were done here for which Germany's memory must also be harnessed. But that can only happen, in my view, if Germany takes full account and responsibility for what has transpired by squaring up with the descendants of the victims. So I think engagement, separation of bilateral and state relationships from Germany's colonial legal responsibility as a result of that genocide is one of the things that I think must be clear. Secondly, a process of atonement by Germany that speaks directly to the victims, not through the state, but directly to the victims. And then finally, the whole question of memorialization in Germany as well, for Germany to remember and put this in the memory that also here, besides what happened during the Holocaust, there were also issues committed of genocide here. And that must also be memorialized in Germany. So I think those are my parting shots. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think it was a worthwhile 2 hours spent discussing this issue. Thanks.
Yeah, very important points from all the three of you that really call for actions.
Wow, that was a lot. That was a lot to take in, and it was very, very, very insightful. I feel very fortunate to have been able to take part in this discussion. I'm sure that this discussion might have stirred some ideas in the audience. So now we want to welcome you to anonymously share your thoughts with us on Menti on the following two questions, dear audience. So the first question is, have you yourself benefited or suffered from colonialism? Or maybe is it both? In my personal case, I would say it is both. As a Colombian man, that is kind of white passing. I don't know. How is it for you? Secondly, what could you personally do in your everyday life to contribute to the pathway of justice? So you can either scan the QR code on the screen, or you can copy and paste the link on the chat. And in addition to that, we would also like to kindly ask you to share your thoughts with us in regards to the quality and execution of this panel. Basically, we're doing this for you. We're doing this to enrich this conversation. So we would be truly grateful to each one of you if you could please spare 5 to 10 minutes in order to fill out an evaluation of the execution and quality of this event. The link will be posted in the chat as well. And now, coming to an end, we would like to take this opportunity to thank from the bottom of our hearts of our three panelists for their time and openness while sharing their views and expertise. And also finally to mention, earlier today and yesterday, our fellow SLE colleagues organized and facilitated other fascinating discussions on the topics of African-German cooperation for energy-intensive value chains and on bridging the gap between wildlife protection and human rights in sub-Saharan Africa. The end of our panel, the one that we just had, marks the official end of this year's Development Policy Discussion Days. In a few weeks, all three groups will publish individual briefing papers incorporating the main ideas discussed in each panel, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. We want to sincerely thank the SLE and the HPS for their valuable support and input as we organize this panel, as well as for the platform that they have provided us with. And finally, dear audience, thank you as well for your active engagement and participation throughout what we hope was a truly enlightening panel. We wish you a wonderful evening. Goodbye.
Thanks for participating in this event. Goodbye.
Hallo, Herr Polenz.
Ja.
Schön, Sie zu sehen. Tina Walter, mein Name. Wir hatten den E-Mail-Kontakt.
Ja.